is up, everyone? I'm Mike with woodshopmike.com, and today I'm going to show you how to turn an ornament on a wood lathe. I like to start by making the globe first, so I head over to the bandsaw and cut out a blank from a piece of marble wood. At the drill press, I now make a hole that will match the bushings I'll use to hold the piece on the lathe. This is a mandrel setup that's typically used to make pins, but it's what I've found is the fastest way for me to make globes for my ornaments. With the right combinations of spacers and bushings in place, I bring up the tailstock for support and start roughing in the globe. Here I'm using a 1/4 inch bowl gouge. I start by just getting the blank round before moving on to establishing the final shape. I use a combination of push cuts and shearing cuts to finesse the shape I'm after. Once I'm done with the right side of the globe, I flip it around so that I can more easily shape the other side to match. With the shaping done, I'm ready to sand. I start with 120 grit and work my way up to 320. To finish things off, I use paste wax. I apply a liberal amount and let it set for a bit before buffing it to a low luster. Personally, I love the way that paste wax brings out the character in wood and still allows you to feel the grain of the wood. Now I'm back over at the bandsaw to cut material for the finials. I use poplar because it's inexpensive, easy to turn, and easy to color, and that'll come in handy later. At the lathe, I put the blank between centers and rough turn it using a 3/4 inch spindle roughing gouge. Once the blank is round, I use a pair of calipers to establish the diameter I need so the blank will fit inside my chuck. Here I'm using a parting tool to establish the top and bottom pieces for the ornament. Now I'm ready to remove the spur drive and attach the chuck to the lathe. I like to start with the top piece for the ornament. This is typically a simple button shape, so it doesn't visually compete with the bottom finial, which is typically very detailed. To shape the top section, I'm using a 1/4 inch spindle gouge. And to shape the tenon that'll secure the top to the globe, I use my parting tool and a set of calipers to cut the tenon to the correct diameter. Once the first section is to the proper size, I make a few additional cuts until the tenon is about 3/8 of an inch long. Now I'm ready to drill a hole in the top of the button that will hold a piece of looped wire for the ornament hanger. I grab my drill chuck from the metal lathe and use a 1/16 inch drill bit to drill the hole for the hanger. With the hole drilled, I'm now ready to sand the top from 120 grit to 320, paying close attention to the contours and doing my best to not alter the design. To color the button, I use a permanent marker with the lathe at a low speed. This is the fastest and easiest way to mimic the look of ebony at a fraction of the price. And to finish things off, I again grab for the paste wax and work a liberal amount onto the piece. After the wax is worked in, I turn up the speed and let the wax dry for a bit. Then with a clean paper towel, I burnish the top. To cut off the button, I grab my thin parting tool and carefully cut it off. Obviously I want to catch it, lest I have to start over. If you're new to wood turning and not up for playing around to catch at the lathe, you could also just turn off the lathe and use a handsaw to remove the button. Now I'm ready to turn the finial. I start by marking where I want my transitions between each element to be using the parting tool, and then rough in the shape with a spindle gouge. While turning finials, I use the tailstock for extra support and leave it in place as long as possible. Also, as you can see, I'm taking light cuts to prevent breaking the piece. With the tailstock removed, I wrap my fingers around the bottom of the tool rest to support the finial while I'm cutting the smaller features. Once the design at the tip of the finial is complete, I finalize the design toward the base of the finial. Working from the far end toward the base helps to minimize the chance of breaking the piece. With the shape of the finial complete, I'd make a quick cut to clean up the underside of the base, and then use the parting tool along with my calipers to cut the tenon to the proper diameter. Now you can see that I'm using the sandpaper to help finalize the shape of this finial, and also I'm rotating it frequently so that way I have a crisp edge for all of those sharp details. With the finial sanded up to 320 grit, I grab my permanent marker again and go through the same process I used for finishing the button to color and finish the finial. So here's a different angle on parting off a piece while the lathe is running. The trick to this cut is using light pressure on the parting tool. Assembling the ornament is pretty easy, as long as you don't glue your fingers together, that is. I use thick CA glue for all the connections and start by first gluing the button in place. Now I glue the finial in place and take special care to only push on the larger portion of the piece while pressing it into the globe. With the ornament assembled, I have one last step to do before I can hang it on the tree. Using a piece of wire, I make a loop and wrap the ends together. This forms the hoop that the hanger will hold on to. I've found that a pair of needle nose pliers and flat nose pliers works well together for this process. Now I apply the smallest dab of super glue and thread that loop into the top of the ornament. Now all I need is a fancy ornament hanger and a Christmas tree. I hope you enjoyed this video and caught it in time to make some Christmas ornaments for yourself or your family. And until next time, have fun making something.